a grabar. Good morning, everyone. My name is Damiana Fernandez from Chiletec, and today we have this amazing workshop with the company of Vlad Cazacu, the CEO of Flowlie, a new company that have a partnership with us. So, Vlad, I please welcome you with all the participants, and you can start the workshop anytime you want. Welcome.
Awesome, Diana. Thank you so much for the introduction and the invite to do this. Welcome, everyone. Really excited to do this. So, a variation of a workshop we've done quite a number of times right now with organizations across the world, and the feedback has been very positive so far in getting the fundamentals of fundraising right, really understanding the basic building blocks of the venture raising capital process, primarily focused on VC, right? So venture capital. We'll touch a little bit on angels and family offices, a little bit on corporate venture capital, but I would say the vast majority of the presentation anchors around VC firms, right? So funds that raise capital from LPs to invest in startup founders. So I'll share my screen right now. Let me know if all can see properly.
Perfect.
Awesome. All right. And we'll touch as well on a few topics around the difference between raising venture capital as an founder from a different country, right? Because a lot of venture capital activity is happening in United States. I would say also UK is a really big market, and you're seeing a lot of US VCs deploying capital across the world, Latin America being a very big hub for receiving investments from US investors. So I want to make sure we touch upon some of these things as well. Before we start, really quick on myself, I'm Vlad. I'm originally from Bucharest, Romania in Eastern Europe. And I had the opportunity to work at 4 different venture firms, FVC, View Venture Partners, Assure Syndicates, and Fuel VC. One of them is actually a multifamily office. Been part of a little bit over 120 transactions throughout that time, led 11 of those, and also did a lot of angel investments myself in addition to that. So I really spent my whole career in venture before starting Flowlie, where we're building a data analytics platform for the private markets, primarily venture raising. So everything that I share in this presentation comes from interacting with thousands of founders throughout my career so far, investing in them, supporting them across US, Europe, and Latin America as well. So quick housekeeping on what we're going to do. We're going to do the fundamentals of fundraising. For the vast majority of the presentation, we're going to, at the end, do about a 2-minute, 3-minute demo of Flowlie's platform and how you could leverage it for the fundraising purpose as well. In part 3, you can ask any questions that you may want, and I'll be able to answer them. As Damiana also mentioned in her disclaimer, which I understood part of it in my very broken Spanish after living in Miami for 4 years, that you will be able to ask any questions throughout the presentation as well. I welcome them. Feel free to raise your hand, drop them in the chat, and Bianca or Damiana will let me know, and I'll pause the presentation and answer your question right there. But without further ado, let's go straight into fundraising. And I like to start this, especially when we speak with an international audience, of some considerations that you must have before you even entertain the conversation of raising capital from any form of US or Canadian or UK investors. When you're looking at the legal structure of any firm that raises that type of capital, investors are okay taking market risk, meaning they're okay investing in a market they may not be so familiar with, or they may be far away from where they have most of their network or other parts of their portfolio, but they're very unlikely to have any form of legal structure risk, meaning the sets of laws and regulations that govern that particular investment need to be very clear to the investor for them to be comfortable making that investment. And what that translates to for international founders is usually a Delaware C Corp. Delaware is one of the most friendly states in the United States in terms of business law, and a C Corp is the traditional structure that most companies are incorporated under in US. So usually having a Delaware C Corp where the money is being received tends to be a prerequisite of getting investments from these investors. Now, more recently, there's also been some new structures that have been created, most popular of them being the Cayman sandwich, when there's a Cayman entity that's owned, that has a US subsidiary, and that allows, again, the investor to invest in a tax favorable structure, for the lack of a better word, and that still protects their investment in case something were to go south. Now, what I would encourage you is that if you go through the process and say, I want to raise venture capital, and not just from local investors in Chile or other Latam countries, but I want to target specifically US investors that deploy capital in Latam, I would set up those entities and have that conversation with the lawyer or whoever else is helping us through that process earlier on, because they tend to be delays. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. There's a lot of education that has to come across to make sure that everything's set up right, and you also understand exactly all the implications. And the more you delay it, the higher likelihood you have of facing delays in the actual process of getting capital. So you don't want operations to be any part of that. Now, from a US market presence, we've seen this on both sides. We've seen investors that have no desire whatsoever for you to have a US market presence or have plans of expanding into the United States. And we also seen investors that have, as part of their investment, an expectation that at some point you'll be able to bring your technology, your product, your service to the US market. And that the reason why they're investing is not just to give you capital, but also extend their network and their expertise in US for your particular use. Now, this will really depend on the investor you're speaking with. My advice before having those conversations is at least entertain the plan of expanding into United States. Now, the reason why I say this is in the case of an investor who doesn't really care about you having a US market presence or not, it's not going to hurt. In the case of an investor who expects you to have a US market presence, not having some answers to these types of questions, at least a plan that sometime in the next 2 to 3 years, we have this opportunity and we have this idea about how we could go into the US market, will actually hurt your odds of getting that capital. Which is why I would suggest having at least a plan, even though you may not necessarily decide to implement it in the next 12, 18 months whatsoever. From a visa and immigration standpoint, if this is very tied to a US market presence, and again, we've seen investors even more so now than ever before pay closer attention to this. If there is a plan for US market presence, there must be a plan for immigration. And I'm not going to spend a presentation. There's a lot of other resources much better and more educated than I am on immigrations and visas, despite having gone through this process myself. But you have to understand what type of visa or immigration plan attaches to your US market presence, because that's now more than ever before is going to be a question that investors will be asking. So with that said, so the legal structure answers around US market presence, answers around visa and immigration. When you're looking at what we would call the right investors for you, I would not spend any time with investors who have not ever deployed international markets. And we'll go into a little bit more detail soon on how you do that research and how you screen investors. We're also going to go into how Flowlie could help with that. But the TLDR here is that VC is a game of momentum, is a game where people tend to do things they've done in the past and may take new bold bets and risks, but not as frequently as you may think. So I've had conversations with certain founders from international markets, Latam, Europe, Southeast Asia, etc. And when they were approaching US investments, they said, well, these investors may not have yet deployed international markets, but maybe they will make an exception. I'm not here to cut any dreams or anything. I just want to present you as transparently as possible the state of the market right now. Investors tend to very rarely make exceptions from what they've usually done. Meaning, if you're looking for investors who have deployed in international market, they have portfolios in those companies, in those countries, you'll have a much higher chance of not having the geography of your incorporation, the geography of your primary market, be in any way detracting from the value you are creating. So, taking a step back from all the international standpoint, I just want to, make a statement. I think it's my responsibility to make this type of disclaimer whenever we speak about venture, is that venture is not the end all be all. Venture is not the only way to attract funding and capital for your particular business. When you are going through the venture capital route, you're effectively selling pieces of your company to an investor with the hopes that the company is going to accelerate and grow, and that investor, that piece of the company that's going to be smaller and smaller with time as it gets diluted, will be worth more and more and more money, and at some point the investor will be able to cash out. That is not the story of every single company out there. And quite frankly, venture capital as an industry is relatively new. Historically speaking, it's been around for maybe 60-ish year. Like that's it. It's not a industry that's been around for hundreds of years. Now, industries that have been around for hundreds of years and supported business throughout that time is really debt financing, bank loans, in the case of US SBA loans, venture debt, etc., where a bank or an entity or a private credit fund gave someone money, expecting to get that money back with some level of interest over a period of time. And that has really built the modern economy in most economies around the world. So I think over the last, let's say, 20 years or so, we've shifted this narrative completely towards venture capital as the only way to get access to capital. And again, I think I would not feel great if I wouldn't spend some time to just explain that there are other ways out there and that venture capital is not something for everyone. When we look at alternatives, so neither debt or at least not structured debt is standard in venture capital. You have all these type of alternatives like revenue-based financings, grants, and crowdfunding. Now, on revenue-based financing, if you are already generating revenue, your company is producing a product or service and is actively selling it. There's so many platforms nowadays across both North America and South America that are willing to effectively give some of your future revenue upfront for a small fee. So they take on your contracts for that particular period, let's say 6, 9, 12 months, and they give you all that money back, and then they'll end up collecting. That allows you to get some of the cash upfront that you can invest in growth and marketing to be able to get more contracts in the future. When you're looking at grants, there's so many organizations, and I'm sure Damiana can speak much more on this specifically for Chile than I can, that are governmental grants, local grants, not-for-profit grants. There's so many different organizations that are incentivizing founders to start new companies. And I think not looking into those is doing yourself a disservice, because you may be surprised by how much free money you can actually get if you know what doors to knock on. Now, my caveat on that is that I've seen, let's call it grant addicted founders out there, and I generally use that term, properly. It sometimes can get addictive. You're getting free money, you're going to get even more free money and more free money and more free money, and you never end up building a business. Which brings me to my final point on this slide, is that regardless of venture capital, debt financing, or any alternative financing, the most important thing you can do for your business is to figure out how you're going to generate revenue as early as humanly possible. And what I'll show you in just a second in the next few slides is that the bar for revenue has been increasing with more and more tooling, making building easier. Especially if you're building a software company right now, it's easier than ever to get started, to get an MVP out there. And I'm not talking about production ready software. I'm talking about an MVP, something to prove that what you're building is worth building. That should take you to some form of revenue proof as early as possible. Now, with that said, assuming you're still in the presentation, you want to hear about venture capital, at what point is venture capital right for you? What questions should you ask yourself as a founder or as a business to understand, am I a good fit for venture capital or not? Now, regarding the business, these are the 4 questions I would ask. Number 1, is there a path to get to $100 million of annual revenue? And the reason for it, and it may shock some people when I say this, but if you're not able to reach $100 million in annual revenue, you may be an unprofitable investment for the investor, which again may come as a shock, because you may say, well, if I make a $50 million annual business, that's a great business. And I agree with you, but it's not a great VC backable business, because the type of risk that VC investors are taking on you, it's significantly higher than the average business, meaning you need to be able to get to extraordinary outcomes. Now, to add more constraints to this, you need to be able to do that in about 8 to 10 years. And that is a structural limitation because VC funds tend to operate for about 10 to 12 years, meaning whenever a VC firm raises a new fund, they need to invest the money and exit the money in about 12 years maximum. So you have to have the ability to get to 100 million of ARR in about 8 to 10 years, meaning you need to be highly scalable, which is why you don't really see venture investments happening in things like restaurants and laundromats and factories and things that are very capex intensive. They tend to be predominantly investing in software and asset-light marketplaces and a few other things. But more important than anything, there must be a path to IPO or M&A in those 8 to 10 years, meaning you cannot run a lifestyle business. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that you as a founder, when you're early stage, pre-seed, seed, should you be thinking about the exit? That's not what I'm saying. But I do think it's worth spending, let's say, 5-10 minutes maximum and asking yourself, is there any public company in my industry? Has any company in my industry reached the public markets? And if the answer to that is no, maybe the industry is just not large enough. So let's drop that requirement for a second and say, is there any large company in my industry? Is there any company that's currently generating 100, 200, 300 million of ARR? And if the answer to that is no, again, we may be trying to create a whole new category. And there's a lot of reading and materials and everything about category creation. If you're not familiar with the term, I would strongly suggest researching the term and seeing some of the articles that have been written on the topic about category creation. Whenever you're creating a new category, it is a very rare event. Most businesses, 99% of the business, don't end up creating a new category. They're just reinventing an existing industry, meaning the constraints of your industry are going to be with you for the foreseeable future. And again, there's some small chances that that particular industry experiences a incredible growth over the span of a few years. But I just wouldn't bet the future of my company and the future of financially of myself and my family and the investors on the potential of that particular industry hitting an inflection point. So, meaning operating a larger market that's fast growing is always going to be much more VC backable than operating in a small, slower growing market. Now, assuming all of those are checked, I think you as a founder must have a quick conversation with yourself and ask yourself, am I willing to give up control? Meaning, am I willing to be less and less of a leader in some regards of my own company? And why do I say this? Is you may still be the CEO of your organization as a founder, but you now have a board of directors that sits on top of you. And they'll be able to make decisions. They'll be able to vote. And quite frankly, it's also in their right to fire you in case you're not performing as a CEO. And I think a lot of people just glance at that, say, oh, the board will never, fire the CEO. And it happens more often than you'd think. Also, you have to be willing to give up ownership. You have to be willing to own less and less and less and less of your company in the hopes, again, that that smaller piece of a larger pie is going to be worth a lot more money. You have to work great under pressure, meaning this sprint or series of, a marathon of sprints over 10 to 10 years is probably one of the hardest things a career could bring. I've met many, many founders throughout my time as an investor and throughout my time at Flowlie. I have a lot of founder friends. And I have yet to see one of them saying it was, a walk in the park. It was super easy, no hardships whatsoever during those years. Everything was smooth sailing. So knowing that you're going to attach yourself to a lot of pressure over an extended period of time, and that's not for everyone. If you were to build a business, this VC pressure of very high growth in a short period of time will just not be there. And if you look at a lot of companies that are reporting, even public companies that are saying, we've grown 10% last year, and they're happy about it. We've grown 20% last year, and they're happy about it. If you tell a VC, especially earlier on, that you grew 20% last year, that's going to be very bad performance. To give you an example of it, and we're not in any way by fastest growing companies out there. We're able to triple in 2024 and achieve growth of 2.5x in 2025. And we're looking to do again in 2026 the same. Those are the types of metrics growing 300, 400% each year, especially earlier on, and then decreasing to about 100% to 150% in the later years. That's required to be able to reach that type of outcome that a VC is expecting of you. So with that said, with all the restrictions and the conversations, assuming you're checked on all 8, and you want to say, okay, Vlad, but how does the fundraising landscape look like? Like, what am I raising from VCs? Here's what we're seeing in US primarily as an average or median of what rounds are happening right now, early stage, meaning we're not going to look at anything series B and above. It's just not in the scope of this presentation. So when we're looking at early stage, the earliest stage that we see forming is this angel/friends and family business connections type of round. They tend to be between $50,000 and $250,000. The valuation range is between 2 and 5 million. Now, one caveat that I will give on this particular table is that when you're looking at LATAM investments more broadly, you tend to see a slight discount on those valuations, a slight increase on the typical dilution. Now, with that said, there's certain markets like Mexico, for example, where they're very close to the US valuation ranges. And there's some other markets like Colombia, for example, which tend to be farther away from those valuation ranges. And to me, that's usually a factor of the maturity of the venture ecosystem in that particular region and how comfortable investors are of investing and exiting companies that are based in that particular market. So I would adjust down the valuation range maybe about 10 to 20% to get to a more concrete number for where things are at right now. In the angel and friends and family, that is the only round that we've seen right now where pre-product, pre-MVP, pre-revenue exists. Even getting to pre-seed, which used to be, you have an idea, it's pre-seed, like there is not even a seed of a product, that hence the name, we're going to invest. Pre-seed right now means an MVP in market, means ideally one paying customer, having proven that what you're building or trying to build is worth enough for someone to open up their wallet and swipe their credit card. This is a very different journey in fundraising market than what we were looking at 2, 3, 4 years ago. The raises are between $500,000 and 1.5. Valuations tend to be between $5 and $12 million. Seed, again, going back 5, maybe 6 years, used to be this idea stage, early prototype. Right now, we are not really seeing seeds being done less than 400 to 500K of ARR. There's some exceptions to this, obviously. If you've graduated from, Stanford, the co-founder graduated from MIT, and you've already built 2 businesses and successfully exited them and all these other things, sure, you may get away with those things. But for the remaining 99.9% of us, this is where the market is at. Having that type of revenue proof at the seed stage showcases investors you have an underlying business that is operating, and you need capital to actually fine-tune it, get closer to product market fit, and get to that $1 million ARR threshold, which is what seed investors are looking for you to achieve after that. When you're looking at Series A, this is where we're seeing now strong volatility in the expectations. Somewhere as small as 1.5 million of ARR and sometimes as high as 5 million of ARR. And that really depends on the industry, the type of gross margin that you're creating out of your company. So think of a software company that's generating 90% gross margins. You're probably going to be closer to the 1.5, 2 million of ARR requirement for the Series A. If you're operating a company that's manufacturing something, or there's we actually have a good friend of mine is building a company that organizes in-person events and dinners. So there's like a cost, to it, right? So whenever you have a company that generates like 50% or 40% gross margins, you're going to be closer to that 4 to 5 million of ARR requirement for the Series A. Now, why are those requirements important? 2 things. One, whenever you're putting a label on your round, investors will just assume that you've thought about it and that's the correct label for you. Just to give you context, in some of my investing career, there were weeks when I was getting 300 to 350 deals thrown my way from the network, cold outreach. I would do cold outbound to some founders, events, etc. These are a lot of deals that an investor has to go through on a weekly basis, meaning it's not the duty of the investor to say, are you in the right bucket or not? You tell me you're raising a Series A, then I'm mentally going to bucket you as a Series A company. So I'm going to start comparing you to other Series A companies. And if you're not meeting the thresholds for a Series A, I'm just going to pass. I'm going to assume, well, because you said you're raising a Series A, you've gone through the pre-seeds and the seeds, and you were not able to reach the milestone for the Series A. Therefore, it's not my job to invest. Now you may say, well, it's my first round. I just mislabeled the Series A. That's your problem, not the investor's problem, which is why this type of work is really important for you to do upfront. The second reason why I understand this is really important is that VCs think in what we call milestone-based fundraising. And I would want more founders to think in the same milestone-based fundraising as investors do, because it's going to help bridge a better dialogue between you and them. What I mean by milestone-based fundraising is whenever you're raising a round, you need to have enough cash on hand to be able to reach the revenue threshold and the growth thresholds for you to raise a round in the future. Meaning, if I'm raising a seed, let's say I'm raising a $2 million or $3 million seed, I need to be certain that with that $3 million seed, I'm going to be able to reach, let's say, $3 million of ARR so that I can guarantee the opportunity to raise a Series A. Now, if I don't have the opportunity to get that type of ARR during the runway that I have with a seed, then I'm either raising too little, I should be raising more, or I'm planning to spend too much and I have an inefficient business, in which point I have to fix the business. So don't go into the market not understanding what the next step is for you, because again, investors pass on bad deals all the time. And a lot of bad deals are bad deals because of the amount people are raising, the stages that they're doing in relation to the revenue growth, not necessarily that the business is bad by itself. And again, feel free at any point now or in the future to raise your hand, drop a question in the comment if you have any questions. Otherwise, let's keep going and we can get to the questions at the end. At this point, you should already be familiar with why VC may or may not be the right track for you. If it is the right track, what you're actually going to raise, how much you're going to ask, and what type of valuation you're going to be looking at. So how do you find the right investors for you? And I tell this story all the time, is that you'd be surprised by the amount of cold emails or inbound that we get as investors from founders who have spent no time researching what we actually do. VC investors, whenever they launch a new fund, you may say, Sequoia launched Sequoia Fund 6, and its focus is to invest in early stage fintech companies. I'm making that up. They may or may not have raised that. That means that they've raised that fund with a specific thesis. They want to invest in early stage fintech. Meaning they can't stray away from that because that's their mandate. That's what they promise the investor that, they get money from other people, right, to invest in. So it's your job to make sure you're reaching out to people where you fit that thesis. That's what we call the thesis fit. Meaning, do they invest in your industry? Do they invest in your stage? Do they invest in your business model? And do they invest in your geography? Because if any of these answers is no, then that investor's likelihood of investing in you is limited to none. And this is really important because you're wasting your time and you're wasting investors' time if you're just reaching out to people that are not a good thesis fit. And what I would say, again, based on my experience and some rough averages, don't quote me on the exact number, I would say that if you do proper research on thesis fit, you're probably going to be in the top 40% of founders, because 60% of founders don't bother doing this. And realistically, it takes a few seconds. Now, if you want to be in the top 10% of founders when fundraising, I would suggest you do the research also around the value add, meaning go a layer deeper than just can they invest in me, and ask yourself, should they invest in me? Meaning, do they have expertise in my business model, in my industry? Do they have a good investor network? Do you think they're able to bring other investors to invest alongside them? Do they have a potential client network? Do they come from the industry in which I'm operating, meaning they probably have really good professional relationships? Do they have a talent network, etc.? Why is that the case? Is because capital is plentiful. There's so much capital out there. And if you're a good company with good fundamentals and you're raising the right round to match that, you will raise some capital. So no worries on that end. Now, is it going to take a week or is it going to get 4 months? Now, that's up to you and what of a process you're running. But there is capital out there for you. Now, you should be asking yourself as a founder, is it the right capital for me? And I can tell you from experience, again, you have great investor-founder relationships, and in some cases, terrible investor-founder relationships. And a lot of people make this analogy to marriage, which I don't really like because I feel it's very superficial on one end, but also because I think it's factually incorrect. So when people say, well, spend as much time vetting your lead investor as you would be spending vetting your future husband or wife or partner. Well, in case at some point in that marriage things go south, you have an option called divorce that allows you to legally separate and then go your merry ways. When you're looking at an investment that has been done in your company, that divorce does not exist, meaning you're effectively stuck together until you get to an exit. So if you are doing business with people you wouldn't want to do business with, more often than not, it's just not going to end well, which is why my suggestion is do the research on the value add in addition to the research on thesis fit. Now, how do you do it? Is obviously investor databases, forum websites, fundraising newsletters, leveraging tools like the Flowlie investor research, etc. Those are great places to start. So do the thesis fit, get out of the way, create a great target list of people you want to reach. Now, on the value add is what we call relationship-based research, meaning get yourself a network of other founders, befriend other founders, ask them about their experience dealing with certain investors. Go through accelerators, organizations like Chiletec, and ask the people working there, hey, by the way, did you ever speak with so-and-so at this firm? Any feedback on them? Because they most likely have this conversation with a lot of founders, so they're going to be repositories of great information about how certain investors work or not. They may say, this person, great person to speak with. This person, I wouldn't suggest reaching out to them. And go to as many networking events as possible. Get yourself part of the community to be able to understand and listen who are the good players and who are the bad players. Again, VC is a large industry, but it's also quite small in terms of number of participants. The word spreads very fast. So if an investor tends to be, for lack of a better word, an asshole and doesn't treat people nicely, and defaults on their payments, whatever, that's going to be known very, very rapidly. So you need to get yourself in positions where you are part of, receiving that information when the time comes. Now, assuming at this point you have a great target list, you've done your research, and you have very clear understanding of who you want to reach out to. And just to give you some context over how many people we're looking at, I would say for a pre-seed, 200-ish, 250 target investors. In the case of a seed, probably around the same, maybe a little bit less, 150 to 200. In the case of a series A, 100 to 150. So when you're doing that first research, you must create a very wide, qualified top of funnel. You can't just skimp on it. So now that you have that list, how do you get in touch with them? There's been a lot of debate recently on are warm intros still relevant or not. Unless proven the contrary, I will continue to go at bat on this, and we've seen it in the data. Warm intros are the most reliable way to get in touch with investors, by far. Now, not all warm intros are made the same. Meaning, if I were to start ranking the types of intros I could get, an intro from an existing investor in my company ranks very high because they already have an economic relationship with me. There's this expression to put your money where your mouth is, right? Like it's to actually invest in things that you're also telling about. So they're going to be very trusted that when they make a suggestion that someone should meet, they already committed to investing in that particular company. Now, a warm intro from a portfolio founder of the target investor is equally good because, again, there's an economic relationship between the portfolio founder and that target investor. So that allows to build a lot of trust when that intro gets made. A connector is also a great source of intros. It's just not going to rank as high as existing investors or portfolio founders. A cold email still works. You're just going to see probably 3 to 4% conversion rate, meaning if you do outreach to about 100 investors, you're probably going to get 3 or 4 to respond, which is why I wouldn't suggest doing that unless it's almost like a last resort. Is we've tried all the warm intro paths, we couldn't get any, therefore we're doing cold outreach. It's okay. Now, the one intro that you should be avoiding is a warm intro for an investor who could have invested but end up passing. Why? Is because those are the investors that had the opportunity to invest. They were not constrained by anything. They decide to pass on the opportunity. And now you're effectively asking them to go to someone else and say, hey, you should meet with so-and-so. Just think of the relationship that gets formed there, where the other person may ask, okay, but did you end up investing? Oh, no, I didn't, because the business model doesn't make sense to me. Well, now you've just raised the expectations for how you should be performing in that first meeting artificially, where you would be better off just cold emailing that person. So that's why I'm not suggesting ever taking those types of intros. Now, if you do end up doing cold email, or even if you're just doing what we call a forwardable blurb, meaning you are sending once you spoke with a person, let's say I speak with Bianca here and say, hey, Bianca, would you be able to introduce me to Damiana? And Bianca messages Damiana and say, Damiana, here's some information about Vlad. Would you want to meet with him? Damiana says, yes, please make the introduction. What Bianca shared with Damiana should be something that I've created. I should not ask the people who are making intros to spend time kind of telling my story. So we call that affordable blurb, meaning I'm going to share Bianca a few bullet points about my company, few paragraphs, and she's going to forward that to Damiana and add a little bit more context on top of it. So affordable blurb and a cold email are going to look very similar. And the most important thing is one of the best advice that I got on this particular topic is in life you have to be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. Meaning you have to find a way to communicate really complex things very concisely, very clearly, and then be okay with sending that. So for the cold email, I would get a personal hook, one sentence on why they're a good fit. That's it, one sentence. Company in one line, so 1 or 2 sentences of what do you do and for whom in the most simplest way possible. Because again, the goal of this is to get understanding, is not to sell the company and get an investment after that email. Proof, so 2 to 3 bullet points of the traction metrics that you have, anything that you want to highlight to investors. The ask, we are raising 1 million seed, we're raising a $3 million seed, we have as much allocation left. Would a meeting next week on Tuesday afternoon work for you or not? If this is not a fit, let me know and I won't follow up. You're asking for a meeting or a fast pass. It's very, very clear. And you want that fast pass. If they're not a fit, they should tell you, I'm not a fit. Perfectly fine. Don't bother reaching out to them again. If they are interested, you should lead with when the meeting is, get to that meeting and convince them from there forward. Now, the one thing that I want to mention, because I had this feedback from a few founders that they never really thought about it this way, is that the goal of the cold email or the warm intro is to signal to the investor that you're worth having a meeting with. You should, as a result of that, get a meeting. That's it. You should optimize for getting a meeting. The goal of the first meeting is to build some relationship, do due diligence on both sides, and get a second meeting to dive deeper into the business. The goal of the second meeting is to get you to due diligence, and the goal of due diligence is to get you an investment. So don't jump the gun. Don't try to convince people to invest in your cold email. And I've seen those emails that span paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs, and like nobody will read them. Nobody will read them. Because again, I'm not trying to make a decision, am I going to invest or not? I'm just trying to see, is this interesting enough for me to take a meeting or not? Also, I would strongly suggest adding a link to your deck as part of that cold email or the affordable blurb. Because if I'm excited about this brief paragraph and a few traction points, I should have an opportunity to learn more on my own pace and make that decision. So again, make the job of the person reading it as easy as possible. So how do you run a tight fundraising process, and what does that mean? My rule of thumb is you should be spending about 80% of your time in the preparation phase and 20% of your time in the execution phase. So before you even start, you must create as wide of a top of funnel as possible. We talked about research and who you should research. We talked about some of the structuring things you should be taking into consideration before even starting the research process. You should be aiming to get at 200, 250 investors that are potential. From there, you must really clearly track your progress towards reaching out to them, meaning any warm interest that you have available towards them, any ones that you started activating, any connector that says, yes, I can introduce you to these few people. All these things need to be very clearly tracked in one place for you to manage them. And then prepare your fundraising materials as early in advance as possible. Have your deck, your data room, ideally a very brief financial model, meaning at least like, do I understand how large can this get? Could even just be a revenue build, like you don't actually have to add the expenses, just a revenue build of how many customers would I actually need to get in order to be able to reach these types of metrics, and what would that mean in terms of market penetration in my geography or other geographies, and be ready to explain how that growth can occur. And then potential investment memo. This is something more new. I've started seeing a lot of founders use it successfully. Consider writing a longer narrative, 4 or 5 pages, as an investment memo on your company. Investors love these things. They'll write one eventually regardless for you. But if you have something pre-written, it's very hard not to impress an investor if you have an investment memo. So all of that should be done in advance. Now, when you're running the process itself, the 20% of the execution, you must activate all your warm introductions as timely as possible to create what we call calendar density, meaning great fundraising journeys have as many meetings as possible in a short period of time. So it's much better to have 20 meetings in 1 week than have 20 meetings over the course of 20 weeks. The only way to predictably raise capital is to get as many meetings as possible in the first few weeks of running that process. That allows you to send regular updates and create these moments of traction, meaning you can say at the end of the week, hey, we have all these people who already are booking second calls. You should be booking a second call. My availability is gone now for Tuesday. We should meet Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. That creates some momentum that signals to investors this deal will be gone at some point. So you either take it or you don't take it. And again, it's not about creating FOMO in the fear of missing out in the, let's say, I don't know how you call it, like the fake sense of way. It's creating like real momentum, saying that yes, I am running a process. It's my process, not yours. Meaning you have to meet my timeline because I have enough people in the pipeline to be able to demand that. And then with that, see who wants to invest or not and be able to drive the process forward. Now, really important before, during, and after the process, your relationships are going to be key to getting a great fundraising process. Meaning you should be spending as much time as possible before you start raising, during, and afterwards, building more relationships with other founders that have been VC backed, investors, people in accelerators, incubators, connectors, etc. Because those are going to be your best paths to get warm interest for your next raise. Now, the last thing that I'll say on the fundraising process is on the first investor meeting, a few quick tips on that. Start strong, meaning you should be starting the meeting asking them questions, not the other way around. If you start a meeting and you see yourself, the first thing you do is just open up the deck and start pitching, that's going to be a bad conversation. Never, ever, ever do that in a fundraising call, especially the first meeting. So start strong, ask questions, build report, ask them, hey, how many investments have you made recently? What's exciting? What's the process looking like after the first meeting for your fund? What types of companies make it a partner meeting. How do you help your portfolio companies? Why do founders choose to work with you? Have them do your due diligence on them the same way they do due diligence on us. Because again, you're trying to figure out, is there a mutual benefit in working together? And during the meeting, make it as interactive as possible. Allow them to ask questions. Use your deck as an assistant. So don't use your deck to pitch them from slide 1 to slide 15. Use it, send it in advance, right? So then ask a question. Hey, have you had a chance to review the deck in advance? And if they say yes, perfect. What parts of the deck were not clear to you? Where should we spend more time? Well, go to market. Okay, then let's go to go to market. Let's keep the things that you already understood so we can focus the 30 minutes on the things that matter most. And most important thing, answer the question asked, stay focused. Do not find other explanations for a question that were not asked to bundle in the thing. We see so many founders that have this tendency, they're afraid of giving the actual answer. So they do all these things and say, well, yes, and actually because of this other thing, and just be transparent. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I'll find out. Not everyone is expecting you to have every single answer out there. So treat that as a transparent human-to-human business interaction. You're not on a pedestal, they're not on a pedestal. You're equals, and you're just trying to figure out, is it worth doing business together or not? So that's all on the presentation itself. I will want to spend just a second on Flowlie to just give you a quick show of how you could leverage Flowlie, or what Flowlie could do if you decide to use it for the fundraising purpose. We'll spend 30 seconds, if not a minute, on that, and then we'll open it up for questions. Just give me 1 second to open up the screen. So should be right there. There it is. So Flowlie Affiliate Build is a platform to help you navigate the fundraising process. On the Grant Planner, you have ways to run benchmarks against your company and other companies, again, to help you identify how much you should sell of your company, what's your current stage, and all the questions we talked about in the structuring piece. We have the investor research, which is a database of investors and firms from across the world with all their transaction data and portfolio data. And we use all that information to calculate what we call our fit scoring, meaning we've trained the model to predict how likely is a firm to invest in your company, which allows us to get very good understanding of the profile that the investor has, meaning you should be spending less time doing your research and effectively allowing our computation to do that work for you. You can create as many target lists as you want. You can also browse our curated lists. If you want to get some of the research already pre-made, you can blacklist people if you don't want to reach out to them because they may have invested in a competitor and such. And then the other part is the network analysis, which is something I'm really excited about. We talked a lot about the warm introductions. You can actually connect your LinkedIn, Google, and import your LinkedIn data. And then you can just select a firm, let's say Sequoia, and click on Sequoia Capital, and then click Find Warm Intros. And what they'll do is you'll actually deploy a series of agents on the web and identify, is there anyone in your network that could potentially be an introduction path towards that firm? So we do all that network analysis for you so that you can go to all your connections and see that in this case, Scott is one of the best connected people in my network and has 78 intros available that he can do. So again, when you optimize for intro paths, this is the way for you to do it. And then we have all the CRM capabilities for you to keep track of everything in one place, fully customizable. Once this loads, I'm not sure why it's taking some time. There it is. Fully customizable as a list or a Kanban. You can track all your conversations in one place, priority, tag them, see how much they invested, etc. Run your own process. And we also have a meeting module, connect to Google Calendar, track all your investor meetings in one place. If they're recorded, you can actually see an overview over that meeting, who participated, all the key discussion points, have all your to-dos mapped automatically from the transcript, and deploy our transcriber to go to those meetings. So should help you be organized and hopefully reduce a lot of time on the research. And as I promised, sub 1 minute on Flowlie, opening it up for any questions that you may have. Feel free to drop them in the chat or unmute, or if there are no questions, we're just gonna end the presentation earlier. It means that did a good job of explaining everything.
I think you actually did a good job. It was a very good presentation, Vlad. But I also want to encourage every participant to unmute their microphones if you have any questions. We're from Latin America, I think most of the people here, so nobody's gonna judge the English if you have any questions. Or maybe we don't have any. Maybe it is. Well,
if there are not any questions, now you'll Bianca will share, or I think Damiana will share an email. I think Bianca will send over some resources we've been putting together over the last few weeks, curated some resources for founders. So we'll share that, including some articles, some videos, as well as some other resources that we suggest people take a look at it, and hopefully give you a starting point on your venture capital raising process. And if you do decide to leverage Flowlie for any part of it, just so you know that with a partnership with Chiletec, we're offering a significant discount to the platform, making it only $33 a month. For that, you'll have the discount code. I know the Bianca put it in the chat, but also have in the email and in the presentation itself. So feel free to reach out to us with any questions at support@flowlie.com if you have any, and follow us on LinkedIn, where we do our best to post more resources and education and information about fundraising.
Awesome, Vlad. I want to thank you for this very interesting presentation. I also want to encourage all the participants to follow us, Chiletec, in our social media channels, both on Instagram and LinkedIn, and also our YouTube channel, because we're going to be uploading this recording there. And like Vlad said, we're going to be sending this email with the link of the recording of the talk and more information about Flowlie and what they do to your emails. Also, don't forget what Vlad actually said, that we have this discount code for Flowlie that will give you 33% off to access Flowlie's data-driven intelligence and fundraising automation platform. So this is a great opportunity. We will also be sending this discount code again in the email. So Vlad, I'll give you the space to you so you can say goodbye to everyone too.
Awesome. I think Gonzalo may have, I think that's a raised hand, so feel free to unmute and ask the question. Glad we had one.
Hi, Vlad. I am from Chile also, and thank you very much for your presentation. It was very clarifying, and you said you explore many topics that are not like public knowledge, and it was very valuable. But I have a question for you. How do you know when you're building a product if you have a right market fit? Because you can be building and focus on building and adding features and other things, and you think that it will be like a success, but many times there are many barriers of entry, not only like regulatory, but also like the risk of taking a new platform that from young people that they don't have experience in the area, like big companies that already do something maybe similar, but yours is different. So
great question. And I think a fundamental question for any founder to ask themselves. I'm not going to claim I have a perfect answer to be clear. I think if I had a perfect answer to it, we would be making a lot of money investing in only companies who have a perfect product market fit. Now, before, I mean, one quick resource before I give my thoughts on it. There's this article, and maybe Bianca, if you can try to find it, is Rahul Vohra from Superhuman wrote an article, I think, on First Round Capital. It's called The Product Market Fit Engine. And that's a great article for anyone to read on the topic, because I think it's the first time someone gives an actual, playbook on how to find product market fit and how Rahul did it at Superhuman. And his whole point is you have to treat this scientifically. Like, you can't go based on, like, it's not an art, it's more of a science than an art. Meaning you have to figure out on a day-to-day, if not week-to-week basis, what type of experiments you're running and what is your expectation out of the experiment. And what is the point at which, quote unquote, you give up or you keep going. Because I know that there's a lot of advice of, just, keep on hammering at things until things fall into place. And I think there's value to it, but I also think there's a lot of let's call it, tact and elegance into understanding when you should give up on an idea because the market is just simply not going to work. And I would optimize for two things. One, whatever you're building is, you need to figure out what are the versions of it that can actually be shipped, if not on a daily basis, on a every other day, if not on every other day, at least every week. Meaning, if you have any release cycle that's longer than a week, you probably just won't have the time to be able to get that feedback in. And getting that feedback in is figuring out, do we have the pipeline to be able to get 1 to 3 new potential customers in the door every single week? If we don't, that's a problem, because we just don't have enough volume to be able to test it. And genuinely, every single week, I would craft myself in a notebook a few hypotheses, because we're releasing this small improvement, this small thing that came from the other feedback. This person will do something different, and then actually test if this person did something different. And I would say, if you get into this type of cycle in product feedback analysis through an experimentation lens over the course of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, and you're seeing nothing improves, I think you must go back to the drawing board and say, am I just going in the wrong path? Because I think YC said this thing that you need to be able to reach 100 customers to know that you have a real business. I think some people are struggling a lot to reach that. And you may say, well, I'm crazy enough to believe that the world will change this direction. And that's great. We need crazy people to be entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs are more crazy than the average person. But I think at some point we will be too crazy and believe something will change when in reality that won't change. So though, I don't know if this like fully answers the question, but I would treat it as an experiment, especially early on. And the best advice that I got was actually from the co-founder of Clay. I don't know if you know the go-to-market automation platform. Met him in New York at an event, and he said something very meaningful to me at that time. He said, the most important thing you should be optimizing for early on is speed to insight. Nothing matters except speed to insight. And that really stuck with me, because it means that the more you can optimize how fast we can go from I have a hypothesis to I know the answer, to I have a hypothesis to I know the answer, that speed is going to be the determining factor. Do I reach product market fit or not? And Rahul has a similar approach, but I don't think he quantifies speed as much as the Clay co-founder did. So hopefully this gave you some direction on that.
Yeah, thanks. I have also a second question, if it is possible.
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah, if the product it is focused in not into not B2B, but more like B2B, but really, I don't know if it is a name, but to government, but like B2G.
B2Gov, yep.
Yeah, B2Gov. And I can't have like 100 customers or
Yep.
many customers. And maybe if the product fails too early, they're just gonna drop it. And
Do you
they're
have a
gonna like all
background
the
in
bureaucracy in
B2Gov?
adopting. Mhm.
Do you have a background in B2Gov? Like,
No,
have you sold things to governments before?
no.
I would say
I
you're
have
probably picking
participated
one of
in
the
a
hardest business models to work on?
Yeah, I think
Like just transparently.
I have participated in there is a thing in Chile that's called Sense that makes like it meets like digital health, and I have participated in a pilot with a hospital, but it is a pilot, and Chile is really difficult to be in a pilot because of bureaucracy. It is also free, but they have like a tons of regulatory things that makes it impossible. So I don't know if
From what I've seen, and again, just treat this as an opinion, right? So take it with a grain of salt. It's not in any way. I'm not here to kind of cut any ideas. But what I've seen works in B2Gov. So actually, let me say this already. I have not seen any B2Gov company work out that did not have in one of the co-founders someone who spent a significant amount of time selling into government prior and has those types of relationships. Simply because B2Gov is not something you end up doing TikTok ads to get them on board. It's handshakes and meetings and lunches and doors that are being opened and favors that are being given in order to be able to get to the right room, to be able to bid on the right proposal, to be able to get the type of contract. And it's just one of the hardest business models to run.
would you
Like
recommend instead like a B2B first or something like that? Or
either
make
that
it maybe
or
make an
finding a
alliance with
co-founder or finding a co-founder that has that type of experience.
okay.
Because you may be able to bring the technical and the idea, and someone else may be able to bring the BD expertise and then their network. So, don't, like, to be clear, like don't disconsider the idea just because it is a hard, like, hard problems tend to get really good results, right? Like, because very few people attempt it. You may just be signing up yourself for an insane few starting years if there isn't anyone in the team who has any form of meaningful government relationships. So, yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Of course. Appreciate the question. And thank you all for joining. We'll, Damiana and Bianca will follow up afterwards.
Yes, I also want to add a very quick another information about Chiletec for those who are here or are listening to the recording maybe and are not yet members of our association but own a tech company and would like to join the association or maybe learn more about what we do or benefits. I invite you to contact us through our social media channels or maybe for our website so we can send you more information. And yeah, that was it. With nothing more to say, thank you again, Vlad and Bianca, for the workshop. Thank you all for attending, and I hope to see you all at a future Chiletec webinar. So take care.
My pleasure. Speak soon. Cheers.
Bye-bye.